willing participant in the religious side of this. In Germany, the fundamentalist Catholics were a big help to the Nazis. In our country, the fundamentalist Christians are a big help to the fascists here. They veil what they're doing through dogma and patriotism so that people will not question the intent. Now, I can say this with some authority because I fell into that same trap, and it's easy to do. Everybody wants to love their country. Everybody wants to think the best of their country. But when you look at the hard evidence, it's hard to ignore. Unfortunately, our country is going to be faced with the same consequences as those villagers at Dachau. At some point, our country is going to get marched through the death camp, and we're going to have to see what we have done. Now, we live in a world right now that has nuclear weapons. And the reason all this is happening with the money right now is way back in the mid-'60s. William Casey, along with some people from the Department of Defense, had come to the conclusion that there was no way a nuclear war could evolve on this planet. The Army War College, the Naval War College, the Air War College used all of the computers and gamed out the whole process. All of them came to the same conclusion. There was no happy ending to a nuclear war, no matter who started, no matter who was first strike or who was retaliating or who was preemptive, just no way around it. So they came up with a plan, and the plan was to undermine the currency of our enemies and make them incapable of waging war. One of the basic principles that they teach in the war colleges is the idea that a strong economy gives you a strong military. Without a strong economy, you have a weak military. And so that concept was played out, and it was brought out, and they discussed it. They wanted to keep it covert, so originally the plan was taken to Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes did not trust the CIA and refused to fund it. That plan stayed shelved until Reagan became president. Then Reagan allowed money to be taken out of the budget and physically, I'm talking about physically, monetarily, gutted the Soviet Union, and they collapsed. All that money that was made in gutting the Soviet currency became basically due to the American people, $43.7 trillion of it. But that was hijacked by Mr. Bush and his cabal, never to be seen again. It was not going to be returned to the American people. Had it been returned to the American people, there wouldn't be the need for global settlements and prosperity programs. All those things were created to hide all this stuff. And so there were two sides of this. There was a good CIA and there was a bad CIA. And these two fought each other. One believed that they were supposed to do the duty of serving the American people, and one group believed they were opportunists, that nobody knew that this money existed, so they were going to use it for their purposes. Now, one of the things the CIA did was use these accounts to launder drug money. And in case you missed the point, the CIA is the organization that runs the drugs around the world. If you have a hard time believing this, I want you to think about this for a moment. Your tax money pays for these satellites that are called Keyhole 11, 12, and 12A satellites. They're about the size of a Greyhound bus. They cost about $2.4 to $2.6 billion a piece. I can park one over your house. I can read the date on a dime you lay in your driveway. I can see the ambient temperature of your body in your house. I can listen to your telephone calls. I can read your emails. Now, the only reason that these people get away with this is the American people are ignorant of the technology we possess. We have a constellation of at least 24 of these satellites, and we can park them anywhere in the world we want. I'm sorry. Did you want to say something? Okay. So the point being, this process of running drugs, if we have those kind of satellites, then how is it we can't find the cocoa plantations and the poppy plantations? If we got that kind of technology, how are drugs produced? You got to have cocoa plants, you've got to have poppies. I find it hard to believe that we can't use those satellites to find them. Well, we don't want to use those satellites to find them. So by taking this equation to where we are today, and we create a system that all the money is backed by hard assets, gold and silver, and we have a method of tracking the money through the Basel III Accord, it will be impossible to launder drug money, and therefore the drug trade will dry up. The covert activities will dry up. You will not be able to fund Al-Qaeda through the Pakistani ISI, which is funded by our CIA. That's the money line to Al-Qaeda. The CIA to the ISI in Pakistan to Al-Qaeda. Those things will not be possible. And that's why there's so much resistance about these global funds coming out, these global settlements, these prosperity packages, and revaluing the dinar. Because all those things make the past obsolete. So this is a lot more than just about money.
So basically, that if you even the playing field and you have transparency, then basically you're giving everybody an equal playing.
Right. You're eliminating the reasons for war. You're eliminating the reasons to have a drug trafficking cartel. You're eliminating the reasons to have an oil cartel that manipulates prices. You're eliminating the chainless slave syndrome around the world. I mean, there's things you don't realize that are right in front of you. Henry Kissinger, obviously everybody knows that Henry Kissinger speaks with a very thick German accent. Very few people know that Henry Kissinger was an SS intelligence officer with the Abwehr during the war. But if you look at his official biography, it says he was an Army intelligence officer. And I know for a fact he was an SS officer. And people go, well, gee, he's a Jew. Yes, indeed. Most of the worst SS were Jews. But don't be fooled by the term Jew. The word Jew was not coined until 1036 by John Wycliffe. Okay, it was a misnomer of Judah, the area in the Middle East. There was no sect or no Jewish religion. There was a Christian sect. But this was all reinvented by the religious people around the world to gain control of people's minds. Now, people go, well, that's impossible. Well, yeah. Well, what is Catholicism? It's universalism. And where did that come from? It came from Emperor Constantine. And why did he do that? Because the Roman Empire was collapsing because of the rebellion between the pagans and the Christians. And so he took pagan rituals and he gave them Christian names and saved the Roman Empire. That cross on your churches is not a cross. When people were crucified, they were not crucified on a cross. It was an economy of effort. They didn't build a cross and then staple people to it. What they did is they put their wrists together and put one big spike through them and hanged them from a tree like that or a post. They didn't build a cross. That cross is actually a T for the pagan god Tannis. And this is how religion is used to control people's minds. And the fascists love that. The fascists are interwoven with their mysticism in a system of gaining people's mind through their belief structures. It's the oldest trick in the book. I'm not saying there isn't a God. Yeah, I believe in a God. I don't want to go off in that tangent. But what I'm trying to explain is religion has been a tool for the fascists for centuries. This is not new. And so by combining religion and patriotism together, you create a very powerful, extremely powerful mindset that you can get people to go off and do the most horrendous things in the name of God and country. And that's how fascism works. That's why the Nazis were so fanatical.
Right. Well, let's switch directions a little bit. What about getting back to, say, China? I know that you had mentioned to me about the gold exchange between the U.S. and China. Maybe that might help you maybe enlighten people a little bit about some of these things.
Sure.
Because one of the things people are always going to ask is that, where's the facts? Where's the evidence? I mean, this is your personal opinion. I mean, I guarantee if somebody probably had blasphemy in their head or shouting it out in just the past 30 seconds, it's because of what you said. Because
right.
you know how you're going to tug on a lot of emotional strings talking about somebody's faith or religion. And I don't see that you're taking away anything from God or Jesus or the Bible or anything of that nature. What you're trying to do is put into context how a manipulation is done, whether it's marketing tools or any number of different things. But I think this conversation with, or you told me about between China and the United States with the gold, I think that may be surprising to a lot of people.
Sure. Okay. And let me go back for a second, and I apologize to anyone I may have offended. And it has nothing to do with faith of real people or real belief. It has everything to do with politicians that manipulate those beliefs. I want to be clear about that. I'm not taking away from anybody's personal beliefs. I believe all religions have merit. Now, getting into the Chinese have been around for a long time, and they have far exceeded the technology that we had. So I'm going to go back a little bit so that you can get a perspective of what the Chinese are all about. A lot of Americans are paranoid of the Chinese. Indeed, my first encounter with that kind of paranoia was when I debated a U.S. congressman about the need to create the B-2. The career I had put me in a situation where I was involved with a lot of high-tech weaponry testing. And before the B-2 even rolled off the assembly line, it was obsolete. But the reason they got funded is some congressmen were convincing people that we needed the B-2 because of the fear of the Chinese. The Chinese have no expansionist intention. First, if you look at what the Chinese have done, 200 years before Christ, they created paper, they created printing, they created gunpowder, and they created the compass. And with the compass, they explored the entire world, and they mapped the entire world. And I defy you to find a Chinese colony anywhere in the world. They didn't colonize like the Europeans did. There's no Chinese colony in South America. There's no Chinese colony in Africa. There's no Chinese colony in North America. That was never their intention. That's not in their psyche. That's only in the Anglo-Western European psyche. So they don't pose a threat as expansionists. Now, they have evolved to, one more point. I think this is fascinating. To me, this is very fascinating. About 1,000 years before Galileo existed, there was a Chinese scientist, I believe his name was Zhao Fang, and he built a 6-story astrolabe. And this was like a very precise clock. And on the top of this astrolabe was a telescope. And at any time in the year, you could go up into this astrolabe and pinpoint any planet or any star. They had already mapped the heavens thousands of years before before Anglos from the west of Europe came to North America. They had such incredible technology. 100 years after Christ was born, they had already had blast furnaces creating cast iron and steel. They were actually making steel. They built 200-pound bombs, cast iron bombs, that were as powerful as the bombs that we dropped from B-17s over Germany during World War II. Very few people realized they had this kind of technology. And you would think with that kind of technology that they would have conquered the world, but they didn't do that. And so we rely on our ignorance to create a paranoia about the Chinese that doesn't exist. Now, let's fast forward to where we are today. In 1933, during the Great Depression, China